here on the Panther-Lair Show on youtube.com/Panther-Lair. Panther-Lair.com, that's what it is, right? youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. You see that website below. That's the one you should be keeping in touch with and keeping track of and checking each day and monitoring to see what's going on in the world of Pitt sports. It's Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. All those things we talk about all the time. And, of course, message boards where people are talking about Pitt sports all the time. You know, they say misery loves company, and I think we certainly all provided each other some company on Saturday night. Not the kind of company that you would like to have on a Saturday night, but we were all there together on Saturday night for the post-game show after Pitt lost at Louisville. You know, we get together, try and give you a little company each morning on the Morning Pitt, and here on the Wednesday Night Live Panther-Lair Show. But I think the message boards are really where we're going to get, you know, the best Pitt fan community that you're going to find on the internet. You are depressed about Pitt football, or at least you were on Saturday night, and probably some of that is carried over to this week. Other Pitt fans are depressed about Pitt football, or else they were on Saturday night and somewhat carrying over to this week. You might as well share together in it. And people were on there all day, every day, talking about Pitt sports. It's football, and it's basketball, and it's recruiting, and it's anything else going on in the world of Pitt sports. It's all right there. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. And, of course, as an extension of the website, we have this YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, where we try to give you extra content, Pitt video content, interviews and press conferences and that kind of thing, but also our, you know, homespun video content, whether it's a live show like this Wednesday night show or the post-game shows that we do after the game. We'll have one Saturday night after the North Carolina game. Or the daily morning Pitt videos that we put out Monday through Friday. Every morning we have a new video for you. It might be 15, 20, 25 minutes, half hour, whatever it is. However much time it takes to talk about whatever's going on in Pitt sports. You know, today we had a recruiting-centric video, talked a lot about Dadron Zipperer decommitting from Pitt, kind of what we read into that, what it might mean for the 2023 recruiting class. It was all recruiting today. Tomorrow we're going to be back to talking about the team and, not surprisingly, talking about the offense. We're going to talk about Pitt's offense tomorrow. We talked about that a lot this week, about what Pitt's offense is, what's wrong with Pitt's offense, what needs to be fixed with Pitt's offense, and just all those questions as we're well past the halfway point of the season. And, I mean, it's no surprise that, like, tonight we're going to talk about Pitt's offense more. And, we'll go wherever the conversation takes us. As far as in the chat screen there, you guys are all, I see chat messages popping up already, and we appreciate that. If you want to join the conversation, you can post your comment, post your question. We'll respond to your comment or answer your question, as many as we can. If you want to make sure your comment gets read, your question gets answered, you can be a super chatter. You click the little $sign down there at the bottom of the chat screen and, contribute a few bucks to the podcast. We very much appreciate that. And we will make sure we read your comment and respond to it, or answer, read your question and answer it to the best of our ability. And by our, I mean, the royal hour, the editorial hour, means me. But that way you can definitely make sure if you feel like your comment's a really good one, your question's a really good one, you can make sure it will get read by being a super chatter. While you're here, like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Click that subscribe button. Turn on the notifications. Then you always get an alert every time we go live. If you were subscribed, you got an alert tonight when we started at 8:30, so you knew it was all good. You might have gotten an alert when I scheduled it. I scheduled it like a half hour or 40 minutes ago. Do you guys get an alert on that? I'm not sure if it works that way or not. I don't think I'm really subscribed to my own YouTube channel. I get notifications every now and then for different channels that I am subscribed to. But I don't know many people, or maybe I don't follow a lot of channels that go live. So I'm not really sure what happens in that situation, but ideally you're able to find out what we're doing, when we're doing it, and you'll never miss any of our live streams. Of course, that'll come especially in handy on Saturday night when Pitt plays at North Carolina for an 8 o'clock prime time kickoff. It was the same thing last week when Pitt played at Louisville, 8 p.m. kickoff there. And, we didn't know what time we were going to get started. I kept saying midnight was my target. Well, it ended up the way that the game was going. I think by the time the fourth quarter started, I had a pretty good feeling we'd be able to start around 11:45. Well, so I tried to tweet it out and spread the word. But, if you're worried that you're going to miss it, subscribe to our YouTube channel and turn on notifications. Then you can get an alert sent right to your phone. And you'll know when we're going live. You won't have to worry about missing it. And that'll be the case again this week with an 8 o'clock kickoff at North Carolina. Carolina likes to pass a lot. Not really sure how long this game might take. I feel like teams that pass a lot, you have these longer games like Pitt, West Virginia, Pitt, Tennessee. There was a lot of passing in those games. And the West Virginia game, I feel like was more a problem with replays. I feel like the reviews and some injuries really slowed that one down. But the Tennessee game, I think, went over 4 hours because there was a lot of passing. And, either way, you're getting incomplete passes or first downs. And, one way or the other, you're stopping the clock, and that's extending the game. So we'll see what happens on Saturday night. We'll see how fast that game goes or how slow it goes. And we'll plan accordingly. But if you want to make sure you don't miss our live post-game show, subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and turn on notifications. You'll be sure to get it. So what's going to happen Saturday night? Pitt, North Carolina. You can start putting your predictions in the chat screen there. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. We'll talk about your predictions in a few minutes. I'm going to talk about the game right now. And obviously there's two sides to it. And you look at it and say, how are you going to stop that offense? Before you even get into questions about Pitt's offense, which are the biggest questions facing the team, and really it's sort of two sides of the same question, but how are you going to, if not stop that North Carolina offense, how are you going to hold them to a low enough point total that your own struggling offense can top? And that's a big question. If you couldn't score more than 10, at Louisville, what are you going to put up at North Carolina? Now, North Carolina's defense looks far more susceptible than Louisville. Not that Louisville had a great defense, but they were pretty good at getting to the quarterback. But North Carolina has objectively the worst defense in the ACC. They've got objectively the best offense in the ACC, but they've got objectively the worst defense in the ACC. So you should be able to put up some points. But can you hold North Carolina to a low enough point total that your offense, even against the most forgiving, vulnerable defense in the conference, can you hold their offense to a low enough point total that your offense can beat it? And this is an offense that's gotten into the 30s a couple times, got into the 40s once, so they're not entirely unable to score. But at the same time, they just scored 10 at Louisville. They scored 21 at against against Georgia Tech, right, or whatever. They had 9 points through the first 3 quarters. I mean, like it was just I don't think I need too many examples to point out how this offense has struggled this season. But they should have their opportunities this weekend. The offense should have opportunities to score. They should be able to run the ball. This is a bad run defense, or it's a run defense that's gotten beaten a lot. It's a pass defense that's gotten beaten a lot. They're at the bottom of the ACC on both sides of that coin, pass and run. They're at the bottom of the ACC in scoring defense. They're in the bottom of the ACC in total defense. I mean, all the ways that you can measure a team's ineffectiveness on defense, Carolina's got it. And so if ever there was a team in this conference that Pitt should be able to move the ball on and have success, even in their struggles, even in their current state, it should be that one. Do I think it's going to happen? I'm not sure. Look, here's the thing with this offense right now, all right? And I know I said I started off with a big question of can the defense play well enough to hold Carolina to a low enough point total to give the offense a chance, and we'll talk about the defense in a second because I really do like what I'm seeing out of that unit. I think they're playing better and better as the season goes on. And here's the thing about the offense, all right? And here's why I feel like this offense, and by extension this team, is going to suck you back in. Like, I don't think they're going to completely tank. They're going to draw your interest back in and draw your emotion back in just enough to make it really hurt if they fall again, if they slip again. But here's the thing with the offense, all right? We know they can run the ball. No, there's any question about that, right? I mean, I think 7 games in, as much as we talk about this offense being a 7-game sample size, that's not a small sample size. We pretty much know who they are at this point. I think part of that is we know who the running game is, and the running game is good. I mean, Izzy Abanikanda has 959 yards, and he's run for like 13 touchdowns. He's off to a great start. And this running game as a whole is playing well. Vincent Davis, when he gets his limited opportunity, starts breaking runs. Rodney Hammond looked really good when he played, although he had to come out of that game with an injury, and we'll see what develops there. And obviously, Abanikanda is playing like one of the best backs in the country. I think Mac Brown called him the best running back in the country. And by the numbers, he's right up there at the top. And so I think you can believe in the run game, right? I think you can believe that this is a good running team. The problems have been in the passing game. The ineffectiveness, the inconsistency, the outright lousiness have come from the passing game. But here's the thing. When they went down to Louisville, and I've talked about this at different points this week. I talked about it after the game. I wrote about it on Monday morning on Panther-Lair.com. I said the crazy thing is, I kind of liked their offense in the first half against Louisville. It doesn't make sense. I mean, you look at it. I mean, they scored 7 points in the first half. But I kind of liked how they played. I mean, it was one of the better halves of total offense they've had, in terms of overall production. Maybe going back to like the Tennessee game or something. I don't think they've had as balanced an offensive attack in a half since probably the first half of the Tennessee game, I would think, or maybe the second half of the West Virginia game. They were balanced. They were attacking in a lot of different ways. They were using a lot of the different things that we talked about last week during the off week. We talked about all the different things they needed to do, the ways they could change the offense, not getting into specific X's and O's, but just talking about different types of passes they could try to work on and different players they could try to get involved. And I mean, I talked about this after the game. I talked about it during the week on the Morning Pit. I wrote about it. I kind of loved what they did. For the most on a lot of these drives in the first half. I mean, when you start off on the first play is a play action rollout to Daniel Carter in the flat for 8 yards. I mean, be still my heart. I mean, like that was exactly the kind of thing I talked about all last week of that, shorter pass where you use the flat and you use the wheel routes and you use those shorter things. You use play action, you move the pocket a little bit, and you just pick up 7-8 yards. That's a great pickup on first down. That's a beautiful pickup on first down because it sets you up to do, what they did next, which is hand the ball off to Izzy Abanikanda and get 10 yards. I like taking shots and maybe some things working downfield on second and short, but it's your second play of the game. It's fine. You want to hand it off and look what you get out of it. You get 10 yards. Maybe Louisville's on its heels a little bit because you ran play action and hit him for an 8-yard pickup. And now your run game hits. And then on the next play, you go to Gavin Bartholomew, you go to El Barto, and you get 18 yards. And you hand it off again, and you get 15. It's humming. It's moving, and they're doing it in different ways. And they're not necessarily attacking downfield. They're not throwing 45-yard passes, but they're throwing a little bit, and they're running a little bit, and they're using play action a little bit, and it's working. It's chipping away. Now, it all falls apart when Keaton Silva throws the interception. That's bad. But to get to that point was good. Second drive of the game, same kind of thing. They're handing it off. They're throwing some passes, throwing some short stuff, and then when they get into 3rd and 7, they go to Mr. Reliable Jared Wayne to convert. And then they use a screen, an honest-to-God running back slip screen that they haven't really used all that much this season. And what happens? They execute it well. The blocking's perfect, and Izzy Abanikanda goes for 37 yards. And then they get to the 12 and bring out the Wildcat, and in one snap, he's in. Another beautiful drive. I mean, a really good drive with passes and runs. And while we've talked so much this season about you got to attack downfield, why aren't they taking shots? They got to take shots. Yes, you need to have that. Eventually needs to be part of your offense, but it's not the only way to move the ball downfield. And if you can effectively mix run and pass, you can have a whole lot of success. If you're able to sort of mix and match those things. It's balance. It's a balanced offense. The third drive, they punt. They pick up a first down or two. and then ended up punting. Again, another situation where they went to Jared Wayne on third down and converted, but they end up punting. The fourth drive, they go all Wildcat, and they march all the way down to I forget where they were. I mean, they're down inside, down close to the red zone, if not in the red zone, before Rodney Hammond fumbles. And then their final drive of the half, again, they drive, they get inside the 40, and Kedon Slovis throws a bad interception. But I was thinking about this, that's 5 drives, right? And your 5 drives, you have, 1 touchdown, 1 drive where you get a first down and then punt, and then the 3 turnovers. And I have to think if you took that, the end result's 7 points. But let's say you took that half and you still have the touchdown drive and you still have the drive where you get a first down and you punt. But then instead of 3 turnovers, you get 3 and outs. Now you tell me which one's the more effective offense. You still have the same end result. You still have only 7 points at halftime. You still have far fewer points than you should have. I mean, you're never going to go into halftime with only 7 points. But when you look at what they were able to do before the 3 crucial mistakes, which is part of it, you can't deny that that's part of it. But you look at all the other plays they ran and all the other success they had, this was an offense that was humming along, kind of controlling the game. If not controlling the game, they were doing what they wanted to do. And they were doing a bunch of different things and getting the ball to a bunch of different guys in a bunch of different ways and having a whole bunch of success. And I think we sit back and we look at it and we say they only scored 10 points. And we say Kedon Slovis looked terrible with those 2 really bad decisions. And we say this offense continues to struggle and they stink and they're not going to do anything. I don't think it takes too much convincing to talk yourself into looking at that first half and say, you know what? There's a few cracks of light shining through here. There's a few things that we're seeing that this offense can do, that if they can build on what they did in that first half and just hold on to the damn ball, don't make terrible decisions on the interceptions, don't have poor ball security. And they could have 21, 24, 28 points at halftime, and then they win that game. You know what I mean? They're 5-2 instead of 4-3. And I think going forward, if they can try to match what they did in that first half, don't think that you're going to need to go out there and get into a bunch of one-play touchdown drives to try and compete with North Carolina. Go out and play your good offense. Go out and play your effective offense, because your good and effective offense looks like what they did in the first half in that game at Louisville, when they showed what they could actually do when they were really kind of humming along. It was a balanced offense. And this is the word that when we talk, there's so much talk about Narduzzi wanting a run-based offense and a Stone Age offense and a Big Ten offense and this offense and that offense. Balance is the word. Balance is what he's looking for. Balance is what he wanted. It's what he wanted after 2018 when they were a one-dimensional running team, and it's what he wanted after 2021 where they were a one-dimensional passing team. And yes, that one-dimensional passing team led to the highest scoring offense in Pitt history, the first 11-win season in 40 years, the first ACC championship in history, a New Year's Day bowl, and the best overall Pitt season maybe since 1976, certainly since the early 1980s. And so that one-dimensional passing offense wasn't all that bad, but that one-dimensional passing offense also had a Heisman Trophy finalist who ended up being a first-round NFL draft pick. And while I think that expectations were high for Kedon Slovis, and rightfully so, I don't think the expectations were that he would be a Heisman Trophy finalist and a first-round NFL draft pick. The expectations were that he would be very good, but not necessarily at that level. In which case you need a more balanced offense. And I don't think it's hard to imagine Pat Narduzzi sitting back and looking at his team and saying, okay, we brought in Kedon Slovis. We had Jordan Addison coming back. This is, when he's assuming Addison was coming back. We're going to add Konate Mumfield to the group. We've got some backs we really like. We got all our offensive line back. We got this tight end that we love. Got a couple other good wide receivers. We may not be quite as high-powered as we were last year because we don't have Kenny. But with the personnel we have and the kind of offense we can run, we might be able to be just as effective in terms of the offense's impact on the team's wins, and the outcome of the games. And I think that's plausible, because I think you could use a balanced offense where an effective and productive run game complements the pass game. and they work together. One sets up the other, and you become truly two-dimensional, and you become really, really dangerous. I think that's all very plausible. And so I think he wanted an offensive coordinator who he felt could bring some balance. It wasn't, Sean Watson didn't have balance. Matt Canada didn't have balance. That was a run-heavy offense. There were pass things in there, but it was a run-heavy offense. And so was Sean Watson, and Mark Whipple didn't have balance either. He was a pass-heavy offense. And yes, that one-dimensional pass-heavy offense worked great in 2021. It didn't work quite so great in 2019 and 2020 when they went 13-10 over 2 seasons. Right? And so I think the goal of balance is a good one. I think the goal of balance is, worth pursuing. And I think there was a little bit of that showing through in the first half at Louisville, which makes me think this team is still capable of doing it. And if they're capable of putting together something of a balanced offense in the next 5 games, if they're capable of playing like they did in the first half against Louisville, and playing like that over the course of a whole game and not committing the turnovers, they can beat North Carolina. They can beat Syracuse. They can beat Virginia. They can beat Duke, and they can beat Miami. And I'm not saying they're going to go 5-0 down the stretch. I'm not saying they're going to win out and finish the regular season at 9-3. That would be a hell of a turnaround, no question. But I think they can win some of these games. I don't think, they don't need to be sweating it going into the Miami game at 5-6, playing for a bowl, which is what they did in 2014. Actually, the last time they won at Miami, they went into the game at 5-6, playing for for a bowl opportunity. And that Miami team, stop me if you've heard this one before, pretty much quit at that point. But Pitt ended up winning the game and went to the Armed Forces Bowl at TCU Stadium to take on Houston. Remember that game? That was fun. What I'm saying is I don't think the final book has been written on this offense. I don't think we've seen this offense play its best game. And I think this offense is capable of more than it has shown and more than it has done so far this season. And one of my main refrains this week, and I'll say this before we jump into the chat screen and see what everybody's talking about and thinking about tonight. We got everybody, there's lots of comments in there for sure. I said this after the game on Saturday night. I said this again on the Morning Pit, I think on Monday. I wrote about it on Panther-Lair.com. I mean, you've heard me say this, but right now, Pitt's offense, the whole is not as great as the sum of its parts. These players are better than they've shown. They have a history of playing better than they've played, other than the running backs. Keaton Slovis has been good in his college career. Kanate Mumfield has been better in his, he was better last year than he's been this year. And it's not just a change in venue and moving up from the MAC to the ACC. I mean, I think he was a freshman All-American for a reason because he was one of the best wide receivers in the country. El Barto didn't forget how to play. Jared Wayne didn't forget how to play. These offensive linemen didn't forget how to play. They're better players than what we've seen. So much so that it doesn't make sense why the end product and the result has not been very good. Why the product has been what it has been when these guys, I believe, and I think rightfully so, these guys are better than that. But that talent, that promise of talent or that potential of talent, combined with a little bit of what we've seen, particularly in that first half against Louisville, makes me think there's still hope for this offense. Now, if they go down to North Carolina and they face the worst defense in the ACC and they still struggle and they still can't make anything happen, well, that post-game show is going to be an interesting one. I might have to get the whiskey bottle out again. All right, let's jump into the comments and the questions. Before we get started on that, of course, we got to talk about Chris Gates. We've talked about Chris a bunch of times. I've been hearing from people who said they've gotten turned on to Chris and what he offers at chrisgatesfitness.com through this podcast, and so that's awesome. I'm really excited that people have been following it. But if you don't know Chris, if you haven't heard me talk about Chris before, he's an online fitness coach from Pittsburgh. He's a huge Pitt fan. And he works, like I said, he's an online fitness coach. So he works with people all over the world to build muscle, burn fat, and this is my favorite part, improve their health through healthy habits with fitness and nutrition. And I love that. I mean, like, sure, I might want to get like big muscles. Might want to lose weight, but mostly I just want to be healthy. And that's what Chris can really help you with. And as an online fitness coach, he like guides, he supports his clients every step of the way. So you show up, you put in the work, and you have confidence that what you're doing is working. And everything's personalized to you. He's an online fitness coach and sort of works with each client individually. He sets up your workout program, your nutritional goals, and does a weekly video check-in and more. And then, Thanksgiving, the holiday season are coming up. Now it's a great time to get your healthy habits in place so you can take steps forward this fall instead of backwards. And we all know what that's like. And the best part is if you go to his website right now, chrisgatesfitness.com, you mentioned Panther-Lair when you apply, you can get 75% off your first month of coaching. If somebody's going to give you 75% off anything, you should take it. And chrisgatesfitness.com right now, you can go and when you apply for individual coaching, you can get 75% off your first month when you mention Panther-Lair. Also, Chris has a tailgate cookbook. There's 2 more home games, so 2 more tailgating opportunities, at least in the regular season coming up. And tailgate food, not always the healthiest or not always the best in terms of your fitness and health and nutrition goals. But Chris has a tailgate cookbook that's available on his website, along with hundreds of articles and podcast episodes on fitness, nutrition, healthy lifestyle habits, everything you could look for. So go to chrisgatesfitness.com. It's Chris, C-H-R-I-S, Gates, G-A-T-E-S, fitness.com. chrisgatesfitness.com. He supports us on the podcast. We appreciate it very much. And so you should go check it out too. chrisgatesfitness.com. Thanks to Chris, and thanks to everybody who's gone and checked Chris out since he started, kind of hanging out with us here on the podcast. He watches the podcast all the time too. So it's if you see him in the chat screen, say what's up. All right, super chatters off the bat, of course. Here, Chris, another Chris says, Chris, are the O-line coach or the players to blame? So the offensive line is an interesting situation. I think one of the common refrains has been, well, this offensive line was clearly overrated. This offensive line clearly, got a reputation for being good, but Kenny Pickett obviously, covered up all of their weaknesses with his mobility. And yeah, I think it helped having a quarterback who could move like that. I sent a tweet during the Steelers game. It was in the first half on Sunday night. Kenny broke a long run to pick up a first down. And I said, yeah, that element is definitely missing from Pitt's offense this year. And it was. I mean, that's something you can't. I mean, you either have a guy who can do it or you have a guy who can't. You can't train a guy or teach a guy how to be a good runner and have good mobility in the pocket or running out of the pocket. And Kenny had that, and Keaton Slovis doesn't. And I definitely remember lots of plays where Kenny Pickett used his mobility to extend the play and keep it alive and maybe make up for some lackluster pass protection that let pass rushers get through and collapse the pocket. But I also remember a lot of snaps, probably even more snaps, where Kenny Pickett dropped back and pretty much just stood like a statue because he didn't have to go anywhere because he had a clean pocket. And he had plenty of time to scan the field, find Jordan Addison, and pick the defense apart because he did have good pass protection. And it wasn't about his mobility. It was about the pass protection. And again, he made a lot of plays. Plays where he would run for a first down, plays where he would avoid a sack and keep a play alive. Kenny Pickett did a lot of that. There's no question. I'm not going to pretend like his mobility was not a factor. But this idea that the offensive line was average or below average last season and Kenny Pickett just kind of covered for them, I think that's false. I really do. When it comes to the performance of the offensive line this year and whether we all overhyped it, the fact that all 5 of those guys were coming back and everything, the reality is, and I've said this a million times, those 5 returning starters from last season have played 0 snaps together, and they're not going to play a single snap together this year with injuries. Gabe Hoy didn't play in the first few games. By the time he came back, Owen Drexel was out. Drexel's not back, but now Carter Warren's out for the season. So even if Drexel comes back or when he comes back later this season, Carter Warren's not going to be there. So you're never going to have those 5 starters playing together this season at Pitt. And really, up until this past week at Louisville, when Gabe Hoy made his first start of the season at right tackle, You only had, the week before the Virginia Tech game, you only had one guy from last year's starting lineup starting at the position he played last year. That was Marcus Minor at left guard. Carter Warren's out with an injury. Gabe Hoy was coming off the bench at right tackle. Jake Cradle moved from right guard into center after Owen Drexel got hurt. And Blake Zabovic ended up having to step up at right guard. And so it's sort of even more interesting that those guys were able to help, open the path for the biggest rushing performance in school history, the biggest single game rushing total in school history, playing as they were with a group that was sort of thrown together, a group that hasn't had it, multiple seasons playing together, older veteran players to be sure, but not the offensive line that we were expecting Pitt to have this season. This is a different group. It's a different group. And so I don't put it all entirely on injuries. I do think that, I think 4 of them were out there for the season opener against West Virginia. And the Tennessee game too. I think 4 of them. I think Carter Warren, Marcus Minor, Owen Drexel, and Jake Cradle played those first couple of games together. And they left something to be desired. There's more pressure on Keaton Slovis than there needed to be. You would like to have seen them do a better job in the run and the pass. But I don't think we can ignore the injuries. I don't think we can ignore the lineup changes. I don't think we can ignore who's been playing, where they've been playing, and who they've been playing next to. And overall, I mean, honestly, at Louisville, yeah, there was pressure on Keaton Slovis. Protection wasn't perfect, but I thought it was good enough. I'm just not as concerned about the offensive line right now as I am about finding a way to get this passing game synced up. And I know it's obviously connected to the pass protection. You need, those guys have to protect Keaton Slovis and give him time to scan the field and find his open receivers. I'm still of the mind that you need to shorten this passing game. You know what I mean? I'm still of the mind that you need to simplify this passing game and cut it down to, 2 reads and a check down. And, particularly, and I talked about this a lot during the off week, when you've got Izzy Abanikanda who could serve as a check down, you've got El Barto who can serve as a check down, drop back, read 1, not there, read 2, not there, hit the check down. It's probably oversimplifying what goes into a college offense. There's probably a whole lot more to it, and you couldn't possibly play that way, but I think simplifying it is probably the way to go. We're all looking for answers right now. And I don't think the problem is the talent on the offense. I don't think the problem is the roster. I think this offense has the talent to be, a top offense in the ACC. And I think it has the talent to be, one of the better offenses in the country. I really do believe in the personnel. And I don't think there are a lot of people who would agree about that, and that's fine. But I believe in it. I mean, the running backs are an obvious one, but I just look at the historical, I look at the resumes of some of these other guys and say they're not bad football players. These are pretty good players, accomplished players, and they should be doing better than they are. So we're looking for answers in the offense. Frank Signetti has to be looking for answers in the offense. And one of the answers to me has to be examining how the scheme is being communicated, how it's being taught, how it's being, coordinated. Because it's not working right now. And so you've got to find better ways to teach it, better ways to communicate it, and better ways to coordinate it. That's what I'm looking for. I don't have huge problems with the personnel at this point. I think it's got to be coached better. Let's see here. We had another super chatter coming in. Yeah, Bill Florigen says, I'm still trying to wrap my mind around why this offense executes and is play called like Jekyll and Hyde. My gut tells me it's Signetti, but not 100%. I mean, I think when you struggle like this, right, and struggle like their offense has, it's never going to be it's never going to be just one thing. You know what I mean? I think it is the coordinator and the coaching staff. I think it is the quarterback. I think it is the offensive line. I think it's the receivers. I think there are different weights you can put on the criticism. You could say, well, there's more on this group or more on that guy or more on this guy or more on that group. But to say it's all on one, it's hard for me to do that, because everybody's made mistakes. I could have giant issues with the play calling and play design, but nobody called the play where they said, all right, on this play, the goal is to throw an interception at the goal line. The goal is to roll, to look downfield, roll out to your right, ignore the fullback who's standing right in front of you, throw it over him, but underthrow the receiver down by the goal line so it can be picked off. Nobody called that play. Nobody called a play where that was supposed to happen. Same thing with the second interception, the third turnover in the game. Nobody called that play. Nobody called a play where half the offensive line doesn't move, so a guy easily runs to the right into the quarterback and knocks the ball out, and Louisville scoops and scores. Nobody called that play, and so I can't put 100% on any group. I can't put 100% on the coordinator. I can't put 100% on the quarterback. I can't put 100% on the line or anybody else. There's a big group that has contributed to this. Some probably deserve more criticism than others, but it's not all just one. It's never going to be just one. A lot of people share the blame right now for what Pitt's offense has become. Jesus Loves Comics says, I was very optimistic about this season. Most likely, I'm just hoping they win a bowl. But if we can beat North Carolina with their bad defense and our defense holds them, I could see us having a chance. Even with the 2 conference losses, the North Carolina game will decide if Pitt has another shot or not at maybe winning the division. It's still wide open. If we beat North Carolina still has to play NC State and Wake Forest. I'm not betting us to win, but if we did, our championship hopes may still be alive, at least until we lose another game. Yeah, so that's the thing. Like, you don't have to be a great team to win the Coastal Division. Great teams do win the Coastal Division, can win I think last year's team was a great team, or at least a very good team. I don't even think you need to be very good to win the Coastal Division. You just need to not be the worst. I mean, right now you look at it, North Carolina's emerged as the top team in the conference. Pitt, Miami are struggling. Duke looks like they are emerging as a legitimate team. Virginia Tech, and Georgia Tech are pretty much at the bottom. And, you don't really look down that list of teams in the division and say that's a murderer's row. You don't look down that list of teams in the division and say, boy, that's a really challenging path. You can win the conference, you can win the division just being okay. Which obviously Pitt has fallen short of that mark thus far. But I also think while they've fallen short of it thus far, they've got opportunities here. This Carolina game, all 5 of these games are winnable. There isn't, a Clemson on here where I look at it and say, well, they're definitely not going to win that one. I still look at the Miami game as being the most challenging one left on the schedule. Despite this trip to Chapel Hill where they've never won, I still look at Miami, even with Miami's struggles. I just look at how tough it's been for Pitt to play down there. And I say, better Pitt teams than this have lost down there. So that's the one that stands out the most to me. But I just don't think, there aren't going to be any pushovers in here. Not with the way Pitt's offense is playing right now. You can't count anyone as a pushover. But there also aren't any unwinnable games. There aren't any truly scary games. This North Carolina offense is scary. I mean, we'll say that. We talk so much about Pitt's offense and what they can do, whether they can score enough. Pitt's defense is going to have to make a few stops, and really, ideally, they're going to have to make a few turnovers. They're going to have to force Drake May into some bad decisions, kind of like they did with Sam Howell last year, particularly in overtime. And they're going to have to make at least a couple stops. They can't let Carolina score quick and often. You know what I mean? They've got to be able to make stops, and it really is the kind of game where every stop is just hugely crucial. A game like Louisville last week, you got off the field because you felt like you were probably going to do that a bunch of times. North Carolina is a different animal because you get off the field, that's huge. Because they really do have the kind of offense that feels like it can score on every possession. So if you're able to get a stop, if you're able to get off the field, or even just force them into a field goal, certainly if you're able to force them into a punt or get a turnover, it feels like a huge momentum swing because you don't know how many of those you're going to get. It's going to be a challenge. Now, I really like, and I mentioned something about this earlier in the show. I like how Pitt's defense is playing. I think Louisville game, they gave up 17 points. They all sort of said, Randy Bates and Eric Hallett said this week that they felt like they gave up too many big plays, which I can understand. I mean, they bid on one, kind of fake screen and ended up leaving a guy wide open. They obviously had the throwback pass to Malik Cunningham, and he took off running, and one or two other sort of bigger plays. But on the whole, I just thought they played really solid. I thought they tackled well. I think they largely covered really well. And they got pressure in the backfield, but, guys like Malik Cunningham, Jeff Sims, to a lesser extent Drake May this week, these are tough guys when you start to pressure them because they can break the pocket down and take off running. And when they take off running, they can be a threat to go a long way. And so you're going to have that challenge again this week. Maybe not quite what you had last week against Malik Cunningham, but you're going to have a challenge of another running quarterback and also a guy who's, arguably the best passer in the ACC right now. So it's a big challenge. But I like this defense's chances. I like their chances of getting some turnovers. I like their chances of potentially holding Carolina maybe under 30. And if you can hold this North Carolina offense under 30, you're going to have a real chance because most offenses should be able to score 30 or more against this Carolina defense. So maybe that's the target. Hold them under 30. I mean, ideally you'd like to get them to like 24 or less. But if you can hold them under 30, I think you're going to give yourself a chance. Let's see here. Chris says Pitt had all the momentum with the win over West Virginia and the strong showing versus Tennessee, and looks nothing like that team now. The offensive line is a mess, and the careless mistakes are killing this team. I think it's hard, or I think it's easy to look back and look at the Tennessee game and look at the end of the Tennessee first half when Keaton Slovis got hurt. On a pretty unnecessary drop back snap, and really point to that as sort of a before and after moment and say, well, he was playing pretty well before that. He was playing, particularly the second half of the West Virginia game, first half of the Tennessee game, he was playing pretty well. Playing at a level that if he could continue playing at that level, he would probably, like his chances of beating Tennessee. But he gets hit right at the end of the first half, gets hurt, doesn't come back for 2 weeks, misses a game and a half, misses some practice time, it's concussion, and hasn't quite looked the same since then. You know what I mean? Has looked a little gun shy, looked a little worried, and feeling pressure even if it's not there, not dealing with it well when it does come, not seeing it, not reading the field as well. And that really does feel like a before and after moment. That hit at the end of the first half. And you just wonder how that game and how the rest of the season might have been different if he didn't take that hit there. And I mean, it's a useless hypothetical. It's not even worth sort of debating or discussing, but it's tough not to think back to that moment and kind of wonder what might have been. Ed Mahoney says, Chris, I'm at a loss for words with this season. I had high hopes of a follow-up ACC championship. I cannot believe I'm saying this, but they could lose the rest of their games or win all of them. Clueless. Yeah, I mean, they could do either one. They could I would not be surprised either way. I would be surprised by 5-0 or 0-5. I would say that. I would think, anything short of that, anything from 1-4 to 4-1 would not surprise me. It would surprise me if they get completely shut out here and go 0-5, and it would surprise me if they win all 5 of them and go undefeated the rest of the way. I would think that would be almost equally unlikely. I don't think they're good enough to consistently. I don't think they haven't shown the ability to consistently play at a high enough level to win 5 in a row. But I also don't think they're as bad as they looked against Louisville. I think their offense can be better than it was. And I mean, like I say, when you look at that Louisville game, the offense moved the ball pretty well in the first half. They just had those crucial errors, but they're still moving the ball. And it's different than if they were just going 3 and out every time. Even if the end result is the same, that they still only had 7 points at halftime. And so, I think they're better than a 10-point team. They're not a team that's going to average 10 points per game over the final 5 games. So they won't go 0-5, down the stretch. I don't think they're going to finish 4-8. But I also don't think they're going to go 9-3. I don't think they're going to go 5-0 down the stretch. And anything in between, whether it's 1-4 or 2-3, you can do the math from there. Any of those other 4 outcomes, I would not be surprised by. Not at all. Now, if they go 4-1 down the stretch, you say, well, that's a pretty decent finish, except it means they go 8-4. And 8-4 would be a pretty disappointing season for this team. With the expectations, what they were, that would be a pretty disappointing season. And, I mean, you could really make a pretty good case that it already has reached the level of disappointing. It's just a question of whether it's going to be a complete disaster or just a disappointment. But we'll see. Hey, they could go down to Carolina, score a bunch of points, beat Carolina, knock off a ranked team on the road, and we'll all feel at least a little bit better, at least for one night, right? Let's see what else we're talking about here. So move through the show. Panther Room says, Chris, where do you think Pitt will go bowling this year? CBS predicted the Sun Bowl. I'm saying best case scenario is the Gator Bowl. And then he follows up and says Pinstripe. I would guess, sort of feels like a Pinstripe Bowl kind of year. I think Brett McMurphy or somebody had them in the Pinstripe Bowl. That's kind of what it feels like to me, a Pinstripe Bowl kind of year. You end up playing a Big Ten opponent, so you get a quality opponent. The bowl itself is a decent one. It's terrible for coverage because we have to sit. The press box is in an end zone, and that's a lousy place to be. And it's open too, and it's cold. That was really unpleasant. Although they gave us a scarf, but we needed a hat. Oh no, we had a hat. We needed gloves. They gave us a scarf and a hat. We needed gloves for that game. But it's convenient for travel. I think Pitt traveled well. Pitt fans traveled well in 2016 when they played Northwestern there in the Pinstripe Bowl. And so I think that would be a pretty good outcome if that's where they end up going. And it just sort of feels like that kind of year, like a Pinstripe Bowl kind of year. Josh Newark says, Chris, unfortunately, I'm beginning to conclude Pat Narduzzi will continue to be a 5-loss coach every year outside of having a Heisman finalist at quarterback. It saddens me as I wish him to succeed. I don't know. I don't know if that's what the ceiling is. I'm never going to be one that says, well, he could only win when he had Kenny Pickett. I mean, yeah, that's part of being really successful is having, a big-time quarterback. And he still recruited that guy here and got him here and kept him here. And, he gets credit for that season. Just like he gets credit for going 5-7 in 2017. Just like he gets credit for going 8-5 in, 2015, 16, and 19. Just like he gets credit for winning the Coastal while going 7-7 in 2018. He gets credit for last year and winning the ACC championship. They're all part of the picture. And yeah, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19, and 20. Actually, for his first 6 seasons, he lost at least 5 games every year. So yeah, if you want to say he's a 5-loss coach, he did it 6 out of his first 7 seasons. So that's probably not too far off, right? I mean, as far as the evidence goes, it's behind it, RJC Man 38 says Narduzzi is the best. How many recruits will bolt as a result of sticking with Slovis? No, none. None. I don't think. Look, here's the thing about sticking with the quarterback. All right, I talked about this on the Morning Pit yesterday, I think it was. I talked about the benching the quarterback conversation and whether Pat Narduzzi should have benched Keaton Slovis in the Louisville game. And here's what it comes down to. Okay? Coaches play the players who in practice and in film and in the meetings inspire the most confidence, give them present themselves as being the most reliable, the most consistent, and as the guys who will give the team the best chance to win. Period. The coaches go through, they rely on the evidence gathered through hundreds of hours of practice and film and all those different things. And then they decide who are the guys who give us the best chance to win. That's where they make those decisions. And then each week they make the decisions again. You know what I mean? You see guys like Tyler Wiltz elevating the depth chart, climbing the depth chart and getting himself more playing time and getting more opportunities because, as he continues to play well in the games, as he continues to practice well, he's showing himself to be a player who can help the team win. Pat Narduzzi, through his evaluations of the team, through practice, through training camp, through practices and film sessions and all those different things, has concluded, presumably with the support of the offensive coaching staff, and probably the defensive staff as well, and probably the team as a whole, has concluded that Kedon Slovis is the best quarterback on the team. That he's the quarterback who gives the team the best chance to win. As such, Kedon Slovis is the guy he's going with. Different coaches might approach it differently in the middle of a game if a quarterback's struggling like Kedon Slovis seemingly did in the first half when he made two really poor decisions. Some coaches might say, all right, I'm going to change it. I'm going to pull him out. He just doesn't have it. He's not going to get it done. I'm going to turn to this backup. Pat Narduzzi says, this is my guy. This is the guy who's the best quarterback on the team. This is the guy who gives us the best chance to win. I believed that when I named him the starter. I believed that when I put him out there as a starter tonight. And I'm going to believe that. I'm going to continue to believe that. I'm not changing my mind based on this half. And I'm going to give him a chance to work through his struggles. He's got my support. He's got the support of the team. And so Kedon Slovis stays in. Fans, in media will often say, we will all often say, like, why not just put in this other guy? Just see what he can do. Just see what happens. And the reality is, for the most part, most football coaches will never just see what happens. They just don't think like that. They're too much of control freaks. They go with what they believe. If they look at something and all the evidence that's presented to them points in one direction, they're going to go in that direction. And even if that direction starts to struggle, even if that direction gets rocky, they're not going to go the other direction just to see what happens. There are rare occasions when coaches will do that. But for the most part, they're going to go with the guys who they believe give the team the best chance to win. Funny thing about coaches, they want to win games. And to win games, they're going to go with the players they believe give them the best chance to win. And they're going to form those opinions based on what the players do in games, but also, and maybe even more so, what the players do in practice and how they practice and how they prepare. And you say, well, some guys are just good practice players and they can't bring it on game day. And some guys are good game players even if they don't practice all that well. Yeah, there probably are those guys out there. I think there are probably examples of those guys out there. But the vast, vast, vast majority of football players play the way they practice. They do. And I think that's what coaches would tell you. Todd Graham used to say it. How you do anything is how you do everything. Right? And I make fun of a lot of things Todd Graham said, but there's some truth to that. And most coaches believe some version of that when it comes to the guys who practice well or the guys who are going to play. And if you don't practice well, if we can't trust you to do your job on the practice field, if we can't trust you to do what you're supposed to be doing on the practice field, when it doesn't count, when it doesn't matter, how can I then put you in the game and trust you to do it out there? You know? And we may not like that, but that's how coaches think. And I think if we were in their position, right, and if it was our job and it was our livelihood and we were trying to win football games and all this stuff, I think most of us would probably go with the guy that we can trust. Go with the guy we believe gives us the best chance to win. And so how many recruits is Narduzzi going to lose for not benching Slovis? I don't know. But I think he's got the support of the offensive coaching staff. And I think he's actually probably got the support of the team. I think Nick Patty has some real support in the locker room. I think the players really respect him. They care for him. He's been around for a long time. But I think they all also saw all the same things that Pat Narduzzi and the offensive staff saw through spring camp, through the summer workouts, through training camp. And they know who the best quarterback is too. And so I was having a conversation with somebody about this, and they said, does it become deflating for the team if you keep putting the same guy out there even though he's struggling? And I said, well, yeah, maybe. I don't know. Maybe. But then, the flip side is, if you take him out, even though everybody on the team knows he's the better option, does that have an impact? Where guys say, oh, are we just giving up now? Not that these players would necessarily think that putting in Nick Patty would mean giving up. But if they still believe that Kedon Slovis is the best quarterback on the team, that he's the best option, that he gives them the best chance to win, then what message are you sending when you pull him out? How are the players going to react to that? And Pat Narduzzi talked about the psychological impact. I think he's probably a little bit worried that once you make that change, now you put yourself in a really tough position of what do you do next? If Nick Patty's good, or if he's not good, or if he's just okay, or if he's only about the same as Kedon Slovis was, what do you do? And do you risk losing even more if you go back to Slovis? Or do you risk losing, more or a lot if you stick with Pat? I mean, I think it comes down to Pat Narduzzi and Frank Cignetti and the Pitt coaching staff believing that Kedon Slovis gives them the best chance to win. And they're going to play the players who give them the best chance to win. All right, scrolling through here, just a couple more minutes. David Masenda says, I'm likely drinking several barrel-aged beers Saturday night and passing out. I had high hopes for this season, but instead I'll focus on my younger daughter finishing chemo recently. Was really debating a trip to Virginia, have family there, maybe waiting several years when Pitt goes back. First of all, David, congratulations to your daughter on finishing chemo. I think, I trust that means that it went well. I hope that it did. And certainly there's some perspective for all of us, I think, to be had with that comment. Now, I'm all in favor of drinking the several barrel-aged beers. David, you should do that. Maybe keep it to one per half. Have one in the first half, have a little bit of snacks late in the half and through halftime, and then open the second one in the second half. And go with those two, and then you'll be up in time. You'll still be kicking for the Panther-Lair post game after the game. I'd love to have you on the live show, David. Let's see. Who else here is got some things to say. G Money says the offense was fine against West Virginia and Tennessee. Pat Narduzzi didn't like not running more and changed the scheme. I think that's I think that's false. I don't think that's true. Look, I don't think Pat Narduzzi dictates the offensive scheme all that much. I think there was one point where he got more involved in the offensive game planning, and that was after the Notre Dame game in 2020. They had an off week. They got crushed by Notre Dame. They lost 45-3. And I think he really dove in on the offensive side there. I said it on the message boards at that time that I had been hearing that he really kind of stuck his head in the in the offensive meetings and really dug in on offense. And then Narduzzi said it later. I think after the season, he said that he really kind of worked with those guys directly, whereas he had previously been pretty hands-off about the offense. And I think that was always his design. He always wanted those older, more veteran coaches on offense so that he could be hands-off, so he could keep his focus mostly on defense and let the offensive coaches coach the offense. But other than really that stretch in 2020, I think he's been pretty hands-off with the offense, at least in terms of dictating scheme. If there's different stuff like, hey, I want us to really attack here, in the middle of a game, or hey, I want us to really kind of slow it down here. I want us to go 2 minute. I want us to go 4 minute. I want us to hurry up. I want us to use tempo. Blah blah blah. He might offer that kind of input, but for the most part, I don't think he really dictates scheme. I don't think he really pushes one way or the other or tries to institute change with the scheme, kind of the way you're suggesting, G Money. So I would disagree with that assessment. Excuse me. I would not disagree with you hitting the like button and hitting the subscribe button, though. Subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com so you can stay up to date on everything we are doing right here with exclusive Pitt video content. I think we got a lot of great Pitt video content. You can spend a lot of time just checking it out. We give you something every day with the Morning Pitt, Monday through Friday. That's lots of Pitt content out there for you. That's like a 20, 25-minute video every morning. Just a little Pitt talk to get your day started. And then, of course, we have this on Wednesday nights, 8:30 p.m., the Panther-Lair Show, a live talk show, just anything you want to talk about with regards to Pitt sports, that's what we do. And then we have the Panther-Lair post-game. After the game on Saturday night, after every game, we go live to talk about what we saw, what happened in the game, what we think, and kind of where our psyches are, what our mindset is going forward from there. Right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We'll be live Saturday night after the North Carolina game, probably around midnight, hoping it's earlier. I'm not entirely sure, but if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you click that subscribe button and turn on notifications, we'll send you an alert when we are going live, so you always know what is happening and when it's going to happen, most importantly. Stay tuned to Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com for all the latest Pitt sports coverage, football, basketball, and recruiting. We have it all there at Panther-Lair.com. There's a ton online to discuss on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. Thanks so much for tuning in tonight to the Panther-Lair Show. It's been a lot of fun, as it always is. We'll be back live again on Saturday night with the Panther-Lair post-game. Until then, we will talk to you on Thursday morning, tomorrow morning, for the Morning Pitt. So make sure you tune in for that. Thanks again to everybody who checked it out tonight. Thanks again for everybody who followed along. And hope you've had a great week so far. Hope you have a great rest of the week. We'll talk to you tomorrow morning for the Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.